I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating against the nightstand, a dull, rhythmic hum that shouldn't have been there. I hadn't set an alarm, and no one ever called me this early, not even spam numbers. The screen was bright in the darkness, displaying a single new app one didn't recognize. Its icon was a black void with a red eye staring back at me, pulsing as if it were alive. The name beneath it read, Mironet. My stomach clenched. I didn't remember downloading anything, and I sure as hell didn't install this. Maybe I had forgotten about it, maybe it was some pre-installed bloatware I had never noticed, but something about it felt wrong. The moment my thumb hovered over it, the screen flickered, as if my phone had just glitched. Then, without me touching a thing, the app opened by itself. At first, the screen was black, like it was loading, but then, without warning, my phone's front camera turned on, filling the display with my own tired, confused reflection. A chill slid down my spine. The camera wasn't supposed to activate without permission. A small, white loading bar appeared at the bottom, crawling forward at an agonizing pace. I tried to exit the app, but my screen wouldn't respond. My fingers swiped, tapped, even tried the home button, nothing. The bar filled completely, and a single notification popped up, "Welcome. You have been selected." My reflection blinked. Except, I hadn't blinked. My breath hitched. I stared at the screen, unable to move, my pulse hammering in my ears. My reflection sat perfectly still, its unblinking eyes locked onto mine. Then, with a sudden, sharp jerk of its head, it leaned closer, grinning. My stomach dropped. The phone vibrated violently in my hands, and the screen went completely black. Then, another notification appeared. "Look behind you." I froze. Every muscle in my body screamed at me not to move, not to obey, but I couldn't stop myself. My breathing came in short, shallow gasps as I turned my head, my eyes scanning the dimly lit room. Nothing was there. Just my bed, my dresser, the half-open closet door. The usual. But the moment I looked back at my phone, the reflection was gone. The camera still showed my room, but I was no longer in it. My heart pounded against my ribs like it was trying to escape. I slammed the phone down, breath shaking. I needed to delete this app. I needed to get rid of it. My fingers fumbled as I pressed down on the icon, holding it until the little X appeared in the corner. I tapped it. "Cannot delete application." The message flashed in bold red letters. I tried again. "Cannot delete application." I swiped to force close it, restarted my phone, even went into my settings, but no matter what I did, the app remained. That same black icon with the red, unblinking eye. My pulse thrummed in my ears. The screen dimmed, and just before it turned off completely, a final message appeared in glowing white text. "You cannot get rid of me. I am already inside." I don't know how long I sat there, staring at my phone screen, my pulse hammering in my ears, my breath coming in sharp, uneven gasps. My mind raced through every possible explanation. Maybe it was some elaborate prank, a virus, a hallucination from lack of sleep, but none of it made sense. An app couldn't do this. It couldn't change my reflection, couldn't make my own image move when I didn't. And it definitely couldn't speak to me. The words, "I am already inside," burned in my mind like a brand, sending shivers down my spine that refused to fade. My fingers trembled as I pressed the power button, forcing my phone to shut off completely. The screen went dark, leaving me alone in the silence of my dimly lit bedroom, but the unease didn't leave. I could feel it, a presence, something lingering just beyond my sight, something watching. The air felt heavier, thicker, like the room itself was pressing in around me. I exhaled shakily, rubbing my hands over my face, trying to shake the creeping dread slithering through my veins. I needed to get out of here. I pushed myself off the bed, barely able to suppress the urge to check over my shoulder. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet as I grabbed my jacket and keys, my only thought being that I needed to be around people. Maybe a drive, maybe a late-night coffee run, anything to clear my head. As I reached for the door handle, my phone vibrated. Once. Twice. Then, the buzzing turned into a violent, continuous shaking, the sound so loud it was like my entire nightstand was rattling. My chest tightened as I turned back. The screen was on. I had turned it off, I knew I had. But now, it was glowing with that same ominous black and red icon pulsing, beating like a heart. The notification bar was flooded with messages, all from an unknown number. Don't ignore me. I see you. Look at the screen. Look at the screen. My hands felt numb as I picked up the phone, unable to stop myself. The moment my fingers touched the glass, the screen glitched violently, lines of static flickering across it like a broken TV. Then, the front camera activated again. This time, there was something behind me. It stood in the shadows of my room, barely visible, but I could see the shape of it, a tall, gaunt figure, its limbs too long, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, as if its neck had been snapped. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to turn, to run, to do anything, but I was frozen, my body refusing to obey. The figure twitched. Moved. Stepped closer. My reflection in the camera looked just as horrified as I felt, my own eyes wide with terror. And then, as if it had been waiting for me to notice, the thing lunged forward. The screen glitched, the image distorting into a mess of black and red pixels. A sharp, ear-piercing noise screeched through the speaker, so loud I dropped the phone, clutching my ears. The moment it hit the floor, everything stopped. The noise cut out. The screen went black. The room was silent. I gasped for breath, chest heaving, my entire body shaking. But the worst part? When I finally found the courage to look around, there was nothing there. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Even with every light in my apartment switched on, every closet door thrown open, every shadow scrutinized until my eyes burned, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The silence was suffocating, pressing in from all sides, so thick it almost had weight. I forced myself to breathe slowly, to keep my hands steady as I paced the small space of my living room, my mind racing with questions I didn't have answers to. What had I seen? Was it real? Had something actually been in my room, or had it just been another trick of that cursed app? My phone sat where I had dropped it, face down on the hardwood floor, completely lifeless. I should have thrown it out, smashed it, destroyed it, but some twisted part of me was afraid that even that wouldn't be enough. It wasn't the phone that was the problem. It was whatever had gotten inside. At some point, exhaustion won out over fear, and I must have drifted into a restless half-sleep on my couch. I don't know how long I was out, but what woke me was a sound I will never forget, the unmistakable noise of my phone turning on by itself. The quiet chime sliced through the stillness like a blade, sending an instant bolt of panic through my chest. My body locked up, my breath caught in my throat. I didn't move. I couldn't. The room was dead silent again, but I felt it. Something was off. Something had changed. I turned my head, slow, reluctant, my stomach twisting into knots as my gaze landed on the device lying face up now, its screen glowing in the darkness. And then, the notification tone. A single message appeared at the top of the screen. A text. From an unknown number. My heart pounded as I forced myself to pick up the phone, my fingers ice cold, my pulse a deafening roar in my ears. Check your front door. A fresh wave of dread rolled through me, thick and suffocating. My fingers clenched around the phone, my knuckles turning white. No. No, I wouldn't. This was exactly what it wanted, wasn't it? To pull me in. To make me obey. My rational mind screamed at me to stay put, to ignore it, to not play along. But the primal part of me, the part that had spent the last few hours drowning in paranoia and fear, was already convinced. What if someone was really out there? What if this wasn't just some sick prank, but something far, far worse? My feet moved before I could stop them, my body acting on instinct rather than logic. The floorboards creaked beneath me as I crept toward the door, the air around me feeling colder with every step. My hand trembled as I reached for the handle, my mind screaming at me to stop, turn back, don't do this, but it was too late. I twisted the lock. I pulled the door open. And then, just beyond the threshold, in the dim glow of the apartment hallway, I saw it. A single Polaroid photo. Lying on the floor. Face down. The moment my eyes landed on it, my stomach twisted into an impossible knot, a sense of overwhelming dread crashing over me like a wave. My breaths came too fast, too shallow, my skin prickling with the unmistakable sensation of being watched. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to leave it alone, to turn, lock the door, pretend none of this was happening. But I couldn't. I had to know. Slowly, carefully, as if touching it might burn me, I reached down and flipped the photo over. And that was the moment I realized that this, all of it, was only the beginning. Because staring back at me from that photograph, was me. But not just me. Me, asleep in my bed. Taken from inside my room. I don't remember how long I stood there, gripping that cursed photograph, my breath shallow, my vision tunneling, the world around me warping into a suffocating blur of static noise. My own image stared back at me from the glossy surface, a perfect snapshot of me curled up in my bed, limbs tangled in the sheets, my face slack with sleep, completely unaware of the unseen presence looming over me as the photo was taken. The angle was impossible. It was taken from inside my room, from above my bed, as if someone, or something, had been standing right there, watching me. The air inside my apartment suddenly felt thick, heavy, wrong, as if the walls themselves had shifted, as if the very space I occupied had been tampered with in a way I couldn't yet comprehend. A cold, sinking realization coiled inside my stomach. This wasn't just a threat. This was proof. Proof that whatever this was, it was already inside. A single notification sound shattered the silence, jolting me so violently that I nearly dropped the photo. My phone screen flickered to life in my trembling hand, and for a second, I couldn't bring myself to look. But then, as if compelled by some twisted force, my eyes locked onto the screen. Another message. The same unknown number. You left the window open. Every muscle in my body tensed at once, my pulse pounding in my ears so loudly that it drowned out rational thought. My gaze snapped toward the bedroom, toward the barely visible outline of the window, half shrouded by the darkness of the unlit room. I knew I hadn't opened it. I knew I would never sleep with it open. But as I stepped forward, each movement slow and deliberate, dread curling around my throat like a noose, I saw it, the curtains shifting. Not from the wind. Not from some innocent draft. But from something else. Something inside the room. The realization sent a violent shiver down my spine. I was not alone. A noise, so soft it was almost imperceptible, whispered through the darkened space, a quiet, deliberate movement, the sound of something shifting against the floor. My heart jackhammered against my ribs as I forced myself forward, my breath shallow and uneven, the weight of the air pressing down on me like an invisible force. The window was cracked open just an inch, just enough for something to slip inside. And then I saw it. A shape, barely distinguishable against the darkness, something low, something wrong, hunched in the shadows near the bed. A grotesque elongated figure, its limbs too thin, its breathing a slow, rattling sound that made my stomach twist in revulsion. And then, just as I opened my mouth, to scream, to move, to do anything, it moved first. Faster than I thought possible. In one impossible, nightmarish motion, it snapped its head toward me, its face a void of shifting static, a blur of something I couldn't process, something the human mind wasn't meant to comprehend. My body reacted before my mind did. I ran. I stumbled through the dark hallway, each step weighted down by the sense of absolute dread that gripped my chest like a vice. My heart was racing, hammering against my ribs as though trying to escape, as I made my way back toward the bedroom. The oppressive silence in my apartment was suffocating, so thick that I felt as if the very air around me was alive, pressing in, warping everything it touched. My thoughts scrambled, desperate for clarity, but all I could think about was the impossible figure I had seen in the corner of my room. I couldn't shake the image of its empty, shifting face, and its bone-chilling movements. It was still out there. Still watching me. There was no doubt in my mind anymore that whatever this was, it wasn't human. And it wasn't leaving. As I stood frozen in the doorway, my body trembling, my eyes adjusted to the dim light of the bedroom, and I saw it again, the window, wide open now. The curtains fluttered unnaturally, as if something invisible was moving them, pulling them aside with deliberate force. My breath caught in my throat, and I took a cautious step forward, my mind screaming at me to turn around, to run, to get out, but my legs refused to obey. I was rooted to the spot, consumed by fear, paralyzed by the sense of impending doom. There was a strange hum now, a vibration that seemed to reverberate through the very walls. It was like a sound that came from deep within the earth, something that made the air feel unnervingly charged. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and I slowly, almost mechanically, reached out for the light switch, flicking it on, praying that the sudden brightness would reveal that nothing was there. But it didn't. It only made it worse. The light illuminated the room, casting long, grotesque shadows on the walls, but the thing was still there, hovering just beyond the edge of the bed, crouched in an unnatural, contorted position. My stomach churned, and my breath came in ragged gasps as my eyes locked onto its form, but this time, I saw it move. Not like before, when it had just snapped its head toward me. No, this time it was coming toward me, its limbs too long, its fingers curling in the air like claws, dragging itself across the floor with an unsettling skittering sound that made my skin crawl. I could hear it breathing, slow and labored, but it wasn't coming from its mouth. No, it was coming from deep within its chest, a wet, gasping noise that sounded like it was struggling to hold itself together. I couldn't take my eyes off it, could barely think, let alone react. My entire body felt like it was frozen in place, bound by some invisible force. And then, a voice. The voice was not mine, not the voice of the thing, but a voice that came from somewhere far deeper, somewhere within the walls. It whispered, low and rasping, so faint that I thought I might be imagining it, but the words, they were clear. You shouldn't have come here. It was a sentence that seemed to come from all around me, from the room, the walls, the floor, the very air, and as the last syllable whispered through the darkness, the lights flickered violently, and the thing lurched forward. I screamed, but the sound was muffled as if the very atmosphere was consuming it. My head spun, dizziness overtaking me as the horror of the moment broke through my fragile defenses. I had to leave. I had to escape. But it was too late. The door slammed shut behind me with an unearthly force, and the last thing I saw before everything went black was the thing's eyes, those shifting, impossible eyes, locking onto mine. I woke up, gasping for air, disoriented and drenched in sweat. My heartbeat pounded against my ribcage as though I had been running for miles, and for a moment, I was sure I had died in my sleep. My room was eerily still, too still, and the oppressive silence swallowed every breath I took. But something was wrong. There was something that lingered in the air, a lingering tension, a presence that I couldn't explain, a weight that settled over me as I tried to push myself upright. The lights flickered overhead, and then, it happened again. My phone, the cursed device that had become both my companion and tormentor, buzzed on the nightstand. I grabbed it, hands shaking, heart racing, almost certain I knew what I would see. But the notification wasn't the usual message. No, it was something far worse. The screen displayed a simple, chilling text message, "I can see you." I froze, eyes locked on the words, unable to process them. It wasn't the text itself that rattled me, but the undeniable feeling that the message wasn't just sent by anyone, it was sent by something that knew me, something that could watch me at any given moment, like a shadow lurking in the corners of my mind, always just out of sight. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through the message, the chilling image of the app still open, its strange icon pulsating in the corner of the screen. The app, the one I couldn't delete, was back, its presence like a dark stain on my consciousness. I could feel it now, thrumming with malevolent energy, as though it had been silently waiting for me to acknowledge it, to unlock something that should never have been uncovered. It was then that I realized the truth: this wasn't just some glitch. This wasn't some random app. It was connected to something far darker, something that had been following me, studying me, since the very first moment I'd opened it. With shaking hands, I tried to close the app, to uninstall it, to do anything that could get rid of the nightmare that was starting to consume me. But no matter what I did, the app wouldn't go away. It refused to close, stubbornly remaining open on the screen like a silent observer, an ever-present threat. The screeching sound that had haunted me before, like nails scraping against metal, rippled through the air again, louder now, until I thought my eardrums might burst. My heart pounded in my chest as I reached for the nightstand drawer, desperate to find something, anything, that might give me some peace of mind, but when I opened it, I saw it. There, staring up at me, was a small, cracked mirror, its surface smeared with fingerprints, but not mine. The realization hit me like a freight train, knocking the air out of my lungs. I hadn't put that mirror there. I hadn't touched it in days. It wasn't just the mirror, though. There, on the other side of the room, was a figure, standing just beyond the edge of my vision, too close to be mistaken for a shadow, but too far to be tangible. I could see its outline in the mirror, just barely, but it was enough to send my mind into a frenzy. The reflection didn't match my room, not completely. The walls seemed to bend, distorting in unnatural ways, as though the very fabric of reality was unraveling before my eyes. And then, in the reflection, a movement, a shift, a stretch. The figure was closer. It was no longer standing still, it was coming toward me. And its eyes, those hollow, piercing eyes, they were locked on me, watching me in a way that made my blood run cold. It was as though the very air had grown heavier, more suffocating, and all I could do was stare at the mirror, unable to look away as it closed the distance between us, step by agonizing step. The room was freezing now. The chill had crept in unnoticed, but it was unmistakable, an overwhelming cold that made every breath I took feel as though I was inhaling ice. The figure in the mirror was closer. Too close. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic, irregular rhythm, and I could feel the sweat clinging to my skin despite the bone-deep cold. I tried to look away, but my eyes refused to leave the reflection. I couldn't. Something dark, held me in place. It was as if the figure wasn't just looking at me, but was feeding on my fear, growing stronger with every moment I spent paralyzed by its gaze. The reflection in the mirror shifted once more, and I saw it. Its face. The thing in the mirror was not human, not in any sense I could recognize. It was a contorted, distorted mask of pure malice, the skin stretched and torn in places, the eyes black as tar, swirling with an emptiness that made my stomach churn. The thing, whatever it was smiling, its lips curling upward in a way that twisted its grotesque features even further. I couldn't scream. The air in my throat turned to stone, cold and suffocating. It was as though the very room itself was crushing the life out of me, draining the sound, the light, the very hope from my body. I reached for my phone, thinking maybe, just maybe, the app could give me some clue, some way out of this nightmare. But when I touched the screen, the message appeared again, more terrifying than before: I see you. And I've been waiting for you. The app, that cursed app that would not close, was more than a tool of torment. It was a gateway. A portal. I could feel it in my bones, the pulse of malevolent energy behind every line of code, every flickering image that danced across the screen. It was alive. It was watching. And it wanted me. I tried to turn off the phone, to break free from its clutches, but no matter what I did, it kept coming back, stronger, more insistent. The app, the figure in the mirror, the voice in my head, they were all connected, feeding off each other, synchronizing in a twisted symphony of dread. Then, a sound, a crack, pierced the silence, so loud, so sudden that I nearly jumped out of my skin. I whipped my head around, searching the room, but it was empty. Nothing was there. I tried to convince myself that it was just my nerves, my mind playing tricks on me, but the crack echoed again. Closer. Right behind me. My heart pounded harder, faster, as I felt the presence, cold, dark, right at my back. I didn't dare turn around. But the air grew heavier, and I could feel the pressure building in my chest, suffocating me, as if the very space itself was closing in. Slowly, I turned, forcing my neck to move against the weight of the unseen force. And then, I saw it. There, standing in the doorway, was a shadow, tall, blacker than the night itself, and impossibly still. It was only a shadow, but it was wrong. Its edges blurred, like it was out of place, something that shouldn't exist in the world of the living. Its presence alone was enough to freeze me to the spot, to make every hair on my body stand on end. The figure in the mirror, the app on my phone, they had been leading up to this. It was here now. And it wasn't alone. In the blink of an eye, the shadow stepped forward, and with it came a chilling whisper, like 1,000 voices murmuring in unison, just beyond the edge of my understanding. "You can't escape," it hissed. "You belong to us now." The words echoed in my mind, reverberating through every cell of my body. I stumbled backward, my legs unsteady, as the reality around me began to warp and twist. The air grew thick with the scent of decay, the walls seemed to shudder as if alive, and the once familiar space around me felt foreign, hostile. I turned toward the phone again, desperate, pleading, but the screen had gone black. The app had disappeared, but its presence was still there, lingering in the room like a shadow of something worse. My breath hitched in my throat as the room seemed to close in on me, the walls pressing inward as the darkness deepened. The thing in the doorway stepped closer, its face now clear, empty sockets staring at me, its mouth opening wide, impossibly wide, to reveal rows of sharp, jagged teeth. I tried to scream, but no sound escaped. This was it. There was no escape. The game was over. I wish I could tell you that I woke up from this nightmare, that the terrifying events of the last few days were just a figment of my imagination, but that's not what happened. The moment I thought I might have found a way out, the walls around me closed in even tighter. I had become trapped in this living nightmare, where there was no escape, no place safe enough to hide. The figure in the doorway was still there, standing like a dark sentinel, its silhouette growing larger, more distinct with every passing second. Its presence wasn't just a sight, it felt like a weight pressing down on my chest, stealing the very breath from my lungs. As I stood there, my mind scrambled for any rational explanation, anything to convince myself that this couldn't be real, but deep down, I knew. This wasn't some dream. It wasn't some cruel trick of my exhausted mind. This thing was real, and it was hungry. Hungry for me. Suddenly, the phone screen flickered back to life, but not in the way I expected. The app, that vile, unseen force, had returned with a vengeance. It wasn't just on the screen anymore, it was inside me, echoing through every fiber of my being, making my body tremble uncontrollably. The words that appeared were cold, sinister, and sent an icy chill through my veins. "You have been chosen. You cannot hide from me. I will find you." The screen pulsed, as though it was alive, like a heart beating in time with my own. The figure in the doorway took a step forward, its slow, deliberate movements echoing throughout the room. I tried to move, to run, but my feet felt as though they were rooted to the ground, unwilling to obey my desperate commands. The shadow in front of me was no longer just a silhouette, its shape morphed into something flesh-like, its edges now distorted and flickering like a broken image. And with each flicker, I could see more of it, more of its grotesque features, the jagged teeth that seemed to grow longer with every blink, the eyes that stared at me with an unblinking, unnatural hunger. My heart hammered in my chest as the phone screen flashed once more, and then, like a scream that clawed at my sanity, it began to play something. A video. The footage was grainy at first, indistinct, but as the seconds ticked by, the image cleared, revealing a scene I knew all too well, my own house. I could see myself, a version of myself standing in the corner of the room, looking out of a window, unaware of the shadow lurking just behind me. And then, in the background, it appeared, the figure. But this time, I wasn't the only one in danger. The video shifted and revealed that someone else was in the room with me, a version of me, but this one, different. The person in the video was smiling. That smile, the one I had seen in the app's messages, that grin twisted in ways it shouldn't have been, like a doppelganger. My stomach turned, a wave of nausea hitting me as I realized what I was seeing. The app wasn't just some digital haunting, it was controlling me, guiding me, shaping me into something else. It wasn't just using me as a vessel, it was making me part of it. I had no idea how, or why, but it had already begun. The walls, once solid and reassuring, now seemed to pulse with energy. I could feel them shift as though the room itself had become a living, breathing thing, alive with malevolent intent. The figure, the monstrous shadow in the doorway, stepped closer, and with each step, the very ground beneath me seemed to tremble. The air was thick, heavy with a suffocating pressure that made it difficult to breathe, to think. And then, the unmistakable sound of a knocking echoed through the room, sharp and insistent. It was coming from somewhere behind me, but I couldn't bring myself to turn around. The knock was followed by another, then another, until it became a rhythmic pounding, as if the walls themselves were trying to break open, trying to reach me. The phone screen flashed once more, and I saw it. The app had opened a new message. "They're coming for you," it read, "I am not the only one. Soon, they will all want you. You will be mine." The message was clear, and with each word, my world grew darker, more distorted, as if the reality I had known was unraveling piece by piece. And that's when I realized the horrifying truth: the app wasn't just an evil force. It was a doorway, a way in for something far worse than I could ever imagine. And it was already here. The pounding continued, relentless and maddening. Each strike reverberated through my bones, shaking the very foundation of the house, and with every thundering blow, I could feel my sanity slipping further away. My eyes darted around the room, searching for any way to escape, any way to stop the nightmare that had become my reality, but the walls, those damn walls, seemed to close in, as though they were alive, hungry. The shadow in the doorway had grown larger, now stretching across the room like a black tide, slowly creeping forward, consuming every trace of light. It was no longer just a shadow, it was something else, a living, breathing nightmare that was closing in on me, suffocating me with its oppressive presence. My body froze, and despite every instinct screaming at me to run, my legs refused to obey. Fear had me paralyzed, my heart pounding so hard in my chest I thought it might burst from sheer terror. I couldn't understand what was happening. The app, the one that had started all of this madness, had now completely consumed my life. It wasn't just controlling me, it was controlling everything. The phone in my hand was no longer just an object. It had become a window, a gateway to something far worse than I could have ever imagined. The screen flickered again, the messages appearing faster now, more erratic, as though the app itself was desperately trying to communicate with me, to force me to understand something that I wasn't ready to comprehend. "You can't escape," the words read. "They are already here." And in that moment, I understood what it meant. It wasn't just about the app, the messages, or the shadow, it was about the entities. Whatever had been summoned into this world through that cursed app had already started its work, taking form. I could feel their presence now, creeping through the room like a thick fog, distorting the air around me, making it impossible to breathe without feeling like I was drowning. I stumbled backward, my hands searching desperately for something to hold on to, something to stop me from being swallowed whole by the darkness. But just as I thought I might find some shred of safety, the phone buzzed again, and the screen flashed, showing a video. But this wasn't just any video, it was a live feed, a real-time broadcast of my own house, my own movements, as if it were watching me. But there was something wrong with the footage, distorted faces, eyes that seemed to shift and blink in unnatural ways, as though the very fabric of reality was starting to unravel. Then, a voice, deep and guttural, came through the speakers of the phone, as if it were coming from the app itself, or worse, from something much worse. "We've been waiting for you," it whispered, and just when I thought I might lose my mind, the figure in the doorway stepped forward, its grotesque form now clearer than ever. It wasn't just a shadow anymore, it was a creature, a twisted being that seemed to merge with the walls, its limbs stretching and contorting in impossible angles, as if it were a part of the very fabric of the house itself. My heart skipped a beat as I realized with utter horror that it wasn't just coming for me. It had already claimed me. The app's messages flashed across the screen once again, but this time, the words were different. The text had changed, no longer just threatening me, it was commanding me. "Join us." The words blurred and danced across the screen like a living entity, like they were carving themselves into my very soul. Panic surged through me, and I felt my breath catch in my throat as I tried to understand what was happening, but the truth was undeniable, this wasn't just some malicious app. This was a conduit, a way for something ancient, something evil, to slip through the cracks of reality and invade our world. And I had opened the door for them. The thought hit me like a tidal wave. The app hadn't just found me, it had been waiting for me. Waiting for me to open the door. And now, with nowhere to run, no way to fight back, I realized that I had become part of something far more horrifying than I could ever have imagined. They were here. And they were not going to let me go. The room felt like it was closing in on me, every breath I took heavier, suffocating, as if the walls were slowly shrinking, pushing me into a corner where escape was no longer an option. The figure, that twisted, incomprehensible creature, loomed in front of me, its shadow stretching and warping across the walls, pulsing with an eerie, sickly light that made my skin crawl. I could hear it, feel it, breathing in rhythm with my own frantic gasps, its presence so suffocating I could almost taste the darkness filling the air around me. It spoke, not with words, but with a guttural hiss that reverberated through the floorboards and rattled the windows, a voice so deep, so ancient, that it seemed to come from the very depths of the earth itself. "You opened the door," it whispered, its voice slithering into my mind like a poisonous snake. "And now, you cannot close it." I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The phone in my hand had become a part of me, a binding force I could no longer escape from. The screen flickered violently, the app's messages now a blur of distorted symbols that seemed to rearrange themselves, taking on shapes I couldn't comprehend. Each new message seemed to burrow deeper into my thoughts, each word an icy needle that pierced my mind, infecting it with thoughts and visions that were not my own. "Join us," it continued to say, over and over, its words a chant, an incantation that burrowed into my very soul, pushing me to the brink of madness. And as I stood there, unable to move, unable to speak, I realized the truth of what I had done. The app wasn't just a tool, it was a summoning, a bridge between this world and something far more terrifying, something that had been waiting, hidden in the dark corners of reality, for someone like me to open the door. Then, with a sickening lurch, the floor beneath me trembled. The room, once solid and familiar, began to bend, twist, and warp as if it were no longer bound by the laws of nature. The walls cracked open, revealing a swirling vortex of darkness, a void that seemed to pulse with a life of its own, as if it were breathing, expanding, and contracting in rhythm with my panicked heartbeat. The phone buzzed in my hand once more, and the screen flashed brightly, showing me a reflection of my own face. But it wasn't me. It was the creature, staring back at me with those empty, hollow eyes, grinning in a way that was not natural, its mouth stretching far too wide. I tried to look away, to tear my eyes from the screen, but I couldn't. The phone had become my anchor, and in that moment, I knew, there was no escaping. No going back. The app had control now, and I was nothing more than a pawn, trapped in a game that was far beyond my understanding. The darkness around me thickened, and the air became suffocating, pushing in on me from all sides. The walls, the floor, even the air itself seemed to pulse and writhe, as though the house itself was alive, breathing with a malevolent hunger. Every corner, every crevice, every shadow was filled with that same oppressive presence, the same feeling I had felt since that first, innocent glance at the app. But now, there was no denying it. The app had taken me, body and soul. I was no longer in control of my own fate. The creature in the doorway took a step forward, its body elongating, twisting in unnatural angles, its arms stretching far too long, its fingers curling like talons. The app on my phone flashed once more, and in bold, red letters, it read, "You belong to us now." And in that moment, I realized with absolute certainty that whatever this thing was, wherever it had come from, it wasn't finished with me yet. No, this was only the beginning.